Hello and welcome to episode 159 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is September 8th, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
We've talked a lot already quite often about Power Platform and the integration to SAP. Microsoft provides several out-of-the-box connectors that make the integration quite easy. However, we've also highlighted that you can get even more out of the Power Platform if you combine it with other Azure services. You can create your own connectors, build your own configuration screens, and also connect directly to Dataverse. Well, I'm really happy to have James and Paul from Bowdark Consulting today with us, who have taken all these components to make the integration possible. You might know both of them from their Switched On podcast, which I also really like to listen to. Before we hand over to them, let's quickly take a look at the news from this week. And we will start with some announcements from Ralph Klar. Ralph has been on the show quite often before, and he just continues to talk about Azure NetApp Files. Goran.
Yeah, so Ralph is an ANF guy, right, in Microsoft, and a very nice blog, kind of maybe even more documentation about using Azure NetApp Snapshot for the SAP MaxDB database. Generally speaking, when you do a snapshot on a database, you want to be in a consistent state. That's always the rule. And he kind of really nicely in detail described how not just to install, but how to configure it, the whole stuff, and how to actually use also the MaxDB snapshotting, as I understood, snapshotting interfaces to put the MaxDB in a consistent state, and then use the AZAC snap tool to do it and how to restore it. So even he wrote some scripts how to do it. So quite very, very detailed, very nice, very long with a lot of screenshots. Yeah, more like a documentation, but very, very useful guide, definitely. And there are quite a lot of MaxDB databases used around in Azure as well, used for the different purposes. I'm always surprised, yes. So I'm pretty sure it will be useful for many customers.
I guess we
kudos
need
to the
invite
screenshots.
Say again?
Said kudos to the screenshots. I
Yep.
love blog posts with screenshots. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's helpful. It's very helpful, although it's sometimes a bit cursed because they are changing, but it's generally useful. Yeah.
Goran, we need to invite Ralph again so he can talk
We
about
need
this.
Ralph again for deep dive. Another point from Cameron on a Microsoft Defender endpoint for SAP application Windows. He was writing, some months ago, similar on a Linux as well.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to go high enough in detail, but basically he is describing or giving the best practices, what you can do it and how you can use it for the SAP, and what is the SAP support statement. Generally, they would say exclude this or exclude that, or maybe turn it off. So he would go quite in the detail in describing. You see here is also talking about the database file, about the SAP MNT files, best practices, and then definitely useful because security is always, important topic, and having such a tool which is doing, having 7 components, not just the antivirus, it's absolutely very, very useful. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Good. Then again, going up the stack, like always, Goran. Power Platform. There is an upcoming Power Platform AI hack. So starting next week, basically, if you have not yet signed up, I really think this is a beautiful or a great opportunity to really build some Power Platform and AI integrations. It's not so much focused on SAP and Power Platform, but actually I posted on LinkedIn that, well, take a look at the video from Nupur, where she had developed this Power Virtual Agent, Teams integration, leveraging AI, connecting it to SAP. Maybe this can also be an inspiration for this Microsoft Power Platform AI hack. And speaking of AI, what I found really interesting, this was just released yesterday. Brad Smith announced the new Copilot copyright commitments for customers. And that's actually really, really interesting because basically what it says, well, I'm not a legal person, obviously, but basically reading through this, there are obviously some concerns like when you use AI, what about all these copyright issues that potentially come up? What about copyright protected information that now shows up in your AI products? And what I really liked was this statement here. We're charging our commercial customers for Copilot, and if their use creates legal issues, we should make this our problem rather than our customer's problem. And I think that's a very, very strong statement that really Microsoft ensures if you are using Copilot, and again, I guess there are some legal fine prints here, but basically what it says, my understanding, if you're using Microsoft Copilot products, then you shouldn't worry about the copyright problems because, I mean, if you do this in the guardrails or in the context of what we ask you to do when you sign the legal agreements with Microsoft, that you are okay. That if there are legal problems concerning copyright, that Microsoft will take care of this. And obviously that's a huge thing to help you consume services, but also here. That we've built important guardrails into Copilot to respect authors' copyright. So if there's content behind a file, behind a paywall or whatever, and there is copyright material, that we make sure that we work with these content authors to really figure out everything that is required there.
This is huge, Holger. I don't want to steal your thunder on your topic, but like everybody I talk to who does like IT leadership kind of stuff, it's almost like half their brain is like, oh, AI, cool. And the other half of their brain is like, OMG, what am I going to do about data and legal risks? That's like their number one thought.
Mhm.
So this is a bright move.
Yeah. So glad you see it as well, because when I read this the first time, I was really impressed actually by the statement. Again, there's probably some fine prints there where you need to, I don't know, but having this statement alone is already a really, really cool thing. Cool. So that was all for this week, which is actually really good because this leaves us a little more time to talk about the actual topic of today's podcast. So, Paul, James, maybe before we go into the actual topic, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Sure.
Why don't I start? I just jumped in there. Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Paul, Chief Nerd at Bowdark. Yes, that's my real title. I begged and pleaded and borrowed to make sure that was my title here at Bowdark. I do lots of things like try to be out there blogging and speaking about stuff and doing some innovation inside Bowdark, and then kind of pre-sale stuff for our customers and stuff like that too.
And you're an SAP mentor as well, right? So
yeah. And I've got a few books out there too. I guess if you want to Google my name, you'll see a few books you can buy. Make me a few bucks royalty-wise on it. Sure, that's fine.
Perfect. James.
Yeah, and James Wood. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Bowdark, and also an SAP mentor alumnus. So kind of similar backgrounds going from SAP, and it's been one of those journeys that takes you from SAP to BTP to Azure, and everywhere beyond into the Microsoft ecosystem.
Cool.
So,
and
sorry, go ahead.
No, you mentioned you are the co-founder of Bowdark. Do you quickly want to talk about what do you do at Bowdark?
Yeah, so we are, our bread and butter is digital transformation solutions, and so we do orbit the SAP and Microsoft spaces, but a lot of what our focus on is working with enterprise customers to kind of weave together solutions that probably touch a lot of different aspects of the enterprise, Salesforce, Workday, you name it. And so, Power Platform and Azure have become more and more of our kind of bread and butter or glue layer to weave all that together. And, we're trying to, specifically in the SAP world, trying to extend the reach of SAP and make sure that customers are able to access the data wherever they are, whether that takes on the shape of a mobile app or something in Teams or virtual agents, you name it. That's kind of that whole digital transformation journey is trying to kind of unlock everything within the enterprise layer.
Cool.
Cool.
Perfect. And yeah, I mean, the way how, well, Paul, we met a few years ago, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. We did. It was a lot. So I used to do a lot more like SAP gateway style blogging and stuff like that. And I think we kind of connected over that back when. And then I see you at conferences every now and again. I think I did a video of you on LinkedIn one time too. That was really fun.
Yes.
But yeah, we just, whenever Holger's in the US, I try to stalk him and find where he is and, engage somehow. It's really fun. Yeah.
And what I really love is that you're really, or I mean, both of you, the whole company is really looking at extending SAP with also this Microsoft flavor. So exactly what we do basically, Goran and I and some folks here at Microsoft, to really see how we can get the best of both worlds to our customers. And I think what you've done is a lot in really taking the Power Platform, but also taking a lot of other Azure services and connect them with SAP. So can you maybe talk a little about why you're looking into the Power Platform? Why is this something that you do in the context of SAP? I mean, SAP also has some great tools, obviously, but why Power Platform at SAP?
Ironically, this journey started before Power Platform was really a thing, back when Dynamics had kind of that XRM flavor. We do a fair amount of work in the CE space, and started kind of looking at all these different XRM options out there and the ways that the customers were integrating those solutions with systems, SAP and otherwise. And so we kind of this concept of Fuse really was born out of an idea of what if we could have a deep integration between Dynamics CRM and the SAP. And then, as fate would have it, XRM started slowly morphing towards, Power Apps and Power Platform. And so it was kind of a natural evolution for us as well to start looking at, well, maybe this has a bigger context. Maybe there's, different use cases for people wanting to extend that reach. And, nowadays with Power Platform, there's so many options. to really push the envelope there.
Cool, yeah. No, it's interesting that you're mentioning Dynamics and SAP, because I was just a few weeks ago I was at a customer that they have an SAP system, and this is their corporate SAP system, obviously, but then they have a lot of subsidiaries where the subsidiaries are using Dynamics. And there needs to be this integration. There needs to be, accounts needs to be updated in both sides, so that if the subsidiary updates some information, and a telephone number or whatever, that this information is also now in the core SAP system. So this integration between Dynamics and your SAP system is obviously something that is very, very crucial.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times those integrations take on the shape of traditional A to A, asynchronous, behind the scenes. Create the sales order in Dynamics, it replicates eventually into SAP and things like that. And I think there's certainly a place for that, but there's also that deep integration that's able to really impact within the CRM tool itself. From pricing to ATP checks and different things. Having that tighter integration creates many new user experiences, I think.
Yeah. And for this user experience, Paul, you mentioned SAP Gateway. So OData obviously comes immediately into my mind. I was lucky. I was at SAP when we basically invented the whole concept of SAP Gateway, when we started to expose these OData services, when we started with SAP Fiori and consuming now SAP data. Now, if we look at the Power Platform as of today, we don't have an OData connector for the Power Platform, but I think that's something where you build something really amazing for the Power Platform, actually.
Yeah, and like I don't know if this is like cool or not to say, but like we're kind of dorks for OData. Like we actually think it's really one of the best ways to do some of that API glue, whether it's UI or even some other flavors of how you pass data around. And it became kind of a natural touch point for that, like get the SAP octopus to like get its tentacles out there into the rest of the ocean of what it can be done with things, right? And like James said, with like in the past, a lot of experiences that were like sort of peripheral to SAP, they would do their thing, and then you would kind of sit around and twiddle your thumbs and wait a few minutes, a few days, whatever, and then a batch process or something would happen, and now you're like your back-end tentacled beast would have the like stuff. And this is just like, now I don't have to wait for processes. I can digitally transform, to kind of use the buzzword, like now, go, let's go. That's the feeling that we want to have, is that don't wait around for the monster to reach his tentacles out. Just do the thing.
Cool, yeah. So could you show us one of the integration, how this actually looks like, or
Yeah.
so basically that we see what it is, and then we can take a closer look at what's actually behind it, or
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
let me-
do. So James has the like developer experience view of what we're sort of planning here for making it really sing in Power Platform, and then I will take the reins of some like backside nerd stuff in Azure and show you some of those pieces too.
perfect.
So, talking about OData, obviously, SAP Gateway plays a major role in this. But, our solution, and I won't steal Paul's thunder here, but, our solution exists, as basically a connector within Azure. And, there's three primary features or functions that this connector performs. Number one, it facilitates end-to-end principal propagation. So, not
single
unlike
sign-on.
things you see with BTP, just having that ability to, whether I'm Power Apps and a mobile app, what have you, whatever I execute in that app, it's fully executed, as my user principal in SAP. The second thing that it provides is a level of caching. And so, just being able to, especially in cases where we're throttling a lot of data back and forth, that there's a little bit of buffer and within the Azure layer to smooth out the processing and make sure that, the consumer apps have as close to a natural real-time experience, even though technically we're still bouncing it off of SAP. And then the last thing it provides is protocol translation. So, in the Power Platform world in particular, we talk about custom connectors. If you're connecting just to a natural OData v2 service, which is where obviously a lot of SAP customers live, then there's some complexity in being able to kind of define that OData v2 service in the form of an open API or Swagger spec. And so by translating to OData v4, it's a much more smooth process for not only custom connectors, but it also facilitates a deep integration with Dataverse, which is the other part of Fuse, and probably what makes it a little bit unique compared to other connectors. Is that we have a data provider built into Dataverse that allows us to take entities from SAP, sales orders, material masters, equipment records, etc., and actually expose them in Dataverse in the form of virtual tables. And that was something that from a maker perspective, it was very key to the design, because we wanted to really take call it the SAP ease out of the integration. So whether or not this is something you park in front of citizen makers, that's maybe a different conversation. But by taking, using good entity data modeling practices and gateway and building, intuitively named entities, we can really take those and map them into Dataverse. And, in this particular example, we've got something that maps directly to an SAP service notification. You can see the column names, have kind of those human readable names. And, there's certainly some SAP, ease in some of the data itself. But, the idea is that, once we get this into Dataverse, that any type of consumer, particularly in the low code Power Platform space, really has a launch pad to go do all kinds of different things. So for example, with Power Apps, we can create not only Canvas apps, but model-driven app experiences where, something like this comes together. Just using the regular low-code tools, we have an ability to, create pretty complex UIs and maybe even mix and match data between, like in the example of Dynamics, this could be something that's, a deep integration between Dynamics Field Service and SAP Customer Service and Enterprise Asset Management. Just having this woven into kind of a one app experience. And, for the maker, when they're looking at this, in a model-driven app, for example, it's just regular Power Apps, right? I have my WYSIWYG screen designer, have all my SAP fields over here, and I can just sort of drag and drop and build the app without really having to go through. There's not a lot of there's no OData ease in the mix here, and so it's just a different type of experience for being able to build solutions.
I feel like sort of it's almost like the some of the even in this like techie thing that we're talking about here, some of the magic I feel like we just have to make clear, like that was live SAP data, and this is live. Like this is not like a copy that you're putting in a bucket somewhere. Like when you touch that stuff, you're touching SAP, which I think is just a different level than a lot of people sort of deal with this stuff. You know what I mean?
And Paul, I think that for me was first of all, when I saw this the first time, that was the key difference. I mean, we have this ERP connector. We have these actions that I can easily build into a Power Automate flow, and then I have this direct connection. But I think here the beauty is that you are able to integrate in Dataverse, and it's not like a copy, a replica of a one-time thing, and then the thing is outdated as soon as the replication is done, basically. But it's this live virtual table connection into Dataverse. And then, as you said, James, as a maker, I just connect to Dataverse. I don't even know that this data is now coming from the SAP system, but I can use my knowledge, my functionalities, and all the goodness that comes with Power Platform and the Dataverse integration and build these applications. And it just happens to be that the data is coming from the SAP system. And if I want to update information there, I just go into the fields, I change the information, and then Dataverse and the connector basically takes care to replicate this information back to the SAP system.
Yeah, that was really our goal. I mean, whether you're in Power Automate and you just want to create something that updates SAP, so a record is created in SharePoint, let's say, and we want to replicate that to SAP. Obviously, to your point, you have the SAP connector there at your disposal. But I also have the ability here just to go through Dataverse to here's my service notifications table. I can find it in my list, and
a lot of tables there, James.
Now my experience looks no different than if I were just building regular Power Automate flows.
And I think this is awesome too. So Holger, I mean, we have talked about, like you and I have talked about AI and been kind of nerds about that. So that preview, the Dataverse flow builder, the AI one, this stuff works with that too, right?
Cool. Yes,
it does. And I've tried it. I do have a little bit of feedback for your AI team. And that is, so some of the like retrieval augmented generation that it's doing to like build the context of stuff. When I make, because I can literally give it a prompt that builds a flow with our like table connecting in there. When I do this, I have to give the prompt the technical name of the tables and fields. Otherwise, it doesn't. No, even if I give it like the display name, it doesn't reach in and find it.
Okay.
But I have some ideas on how to fix that up too. But like, so if I kind of like goose the prompt a little bit, I can make it work like prompt, boom, done. But it takes a little. I'd be happy to provide some feedback. I have some great thoughts on that too.
Sure.
Anyway, I'm a huge dork for it. So blah, 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 yeah.
No, but James, I think and that's really this amazing thing. If I use the ERP connector, then I have access to the data, but But here, if I have the data via Dataverse in Power Platform, then I can really benefit. And I hadn't thought about the AI piece, Paul, but you're right. I can benefit from all the Dataverse integration that comes from a Microsoft side and really leverage this also for the data coming from SAP in this specific case.
Yeah, I mean, being able to I mean, not have to specify details about RFCs. I mean, there are some things that if you don't live in that SAP space, sometimes although the ERP connector has taken a lot of the complexity out of the mix, there's still that need for SAP knowledge that the goal here hopefully is to provide a different kind of abstraction for those specific types of use cases.
So basically you would abstract not just the connector, but also the protocols to read the stuff and also to write it back to SAP if needed.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have the full CRUD capabilities and all of that.
Dataverse speaks OData, so it just flows.
So Paul, can we do a behind the scene look basically?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
You already or James, you showed in the architecture that there was Azure Functions. There's obviously the Dataverse connection. Yeah, exactly. We have a few other components you're using. Azure Hybrid Connection, which I think is also obviously really important because in a lot of cases the SAP system is either on premise or it's behind firewalls. So we somehow need to get to the SAP system. You talked about principal propagation, which I think is super important for when you open up your Power Platform, you authenticate with Azure Active Directory, but you obviously want to connect with your user to the SAP system. So can we take a look how you use these different Azure services to make this happen?
Yes. You guys see my screen okay there?
Yes.
Okay. So at the layer behind Power Platform here, what we have at the highest level is an Azure web app that glues a lot of pieces together to provide that protocol translation James talked about, and then provide that like the bits and bytes of that single sign-on experience that takes all your certificates and tokens and like does the talking there. So this particular web app that we built here, it provides like a visual UI interface. So you as an administrator can go out and like add the particular OData services that you want from your system to this connection path for this stuff. So that's one piece. And then you can bounce around and you can add other OData services. Right. So if I click add service here, it'll go out and read my catalog of my SAP system. And then I can just scroll through and pick this stuff. Now, out of the box, I mean, you guys all know that out of the box, there are some OData services that you don't really care about for like your end users, right? So we decided to make it very selective. Like only what you choose here gets exposed back out to Dataverse. So I don't want to go and mess with something else here. But then, so the ones that I have chosen, like I have an admin interface here that if I want to, I can kind of poke and prod them. I can download the metadata or service docs if I want to for those things. But I think the key thing is that, where's my application here? Yeah, is that this web app also then, once you do that config hookup, you've got that piece that's like translating stuff back and forth. So the Azure web app is the governing piece of this stuff. As James said, there is some caching, but really it's not caching your transactional data. It's just smoothing some of the interactions that make it fast, right? So we do cache, like we use Redis to cache some of the metadata or service document data to make some of that protocol translation much, much faster. But your SAP data is still housed and living in SAP. That's not where we cache it here. We're not caching your data. So there's a Redis cache involved here. For some of these things, I'm not going to go through all the settings, right? Because
sure, no, yeah, of course,
yeah. But so there's a Redis cache involved for that kind of stuff. We've got, I mean, for you data nerds, there's a SQL database behind that stuff too. It's very lightly used because it's really just storing the connections setup information there. So that's kind of really all we're doing with SQL databases, but that's there too. As you mentioned, or as James mentioned, there is that sense of like how do I put this past my firewall, right? If I'm using the Azure services, but I've got my systems managed elsewhere or managed somewhere that I manage, Azure provides this hybrid connection process where you install just like the SAP Cloud Connector, right? Where you install a little agent inside your system that can then kind of reverse VPN to Azure and provide that secure tunnel to that on-premise system that then allows the OData traffic to flow out back and forth between the systems there. And then I think one more techie piece here is that we do store some, I mean, we'll just acknowledge that it stores some sensitive information when we set things up. And so we use Key Vault as the like mega lockdown place for some of that sensitive information in that stuff. And then the way we designed this too is that, you know, as we make use of this, it became important to us to sort of give folks their own sets of locks and keys for how they do this. So when somebody uses Fuse to do whatever, they are the owners of the key vault that stores that stuff. They are the owners of the app service stuff, right? It's still inside the bounds of like how tightly you want to restrict and manage that set of information for folks. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
It's still very like when we go work on this stuff, it's not like we're holding the secret passcode to do all the things. Like you use it. It's your stuff. Take exactly the precautions that you want to take with all that stuff. Let's see. Anything else techie wise? I mentioned the Redis.
Maybe one question, Paul.
Yeah.
The Azure Hybrid Connector, it's actually the piece which is sitting behind the corporate firewall, right? And I think it's having outward connection.
Yeah.
Meaning 443, it's an HTTPS, I believe. So generally that's always kind of enabled. So meaning you can connect to any kind of SAP anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere sitting in anything.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we connect to, you know, ECC. I mean, basically anything that can run gateway is a candidate system, you know, all the way up to S4, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is like, so this is just another, just administratively and risk management wise, this is another point of control, right? If you have an emergency situation of your data or something like that, like if you go turn this off, boom, now you're firewall back inside everything, right? So it's still very along the lines of other kinds of solutions that do that kind of process, you know.
Cool.
Yeah.
So when we look at scenarios, I mean now we have the connectivity. You have. Oh wait, but before we go there, maybe actually when we talk about the single sign-on, the principal propagation. So I log on with Azure Active Directory. How do you do the token translation basically?
Yeah, so that goes through. So you guys have probably seen, you know, back inside ECC or ERP or whatever, you know what I mean? Like you go configure the SSO stuff on that side, and you've probably gone through the steps of like connecting an Active Directory to that stuff. That is the same way that this stuff works too. You just provide the Azure settings for that stuff into the SAP configuration of those things, and then it behaves just like anything else you've done SSO wise in your SAP systems.
Perfect. And so again, for me as an end user, I literally just start my Power App. Like all the other Power Apps, I need to authenticate with my Azure Active Directory user, and then using the connectivities of Fuse, the configuration screen that you showed there, I'm forwarded to the SAP system. You do the token exchange to get the right access token to call the OData service on the SAP side, and that's how we do the authentication there.
In the ideal universe, you as somebody who uses, or maybe even makes, but we'll see. But as somebody who uses a Power App, you should never even know that your bits and bytes are touching SAP. You're just like doing your process. You know what I mean? That's the beautiful universe we see.
Yeah, I want to access sales orders. Okay, the sales orders are in my Dataverse table. perfect. I'll use them. I build my Power App or whatever, just accessing Dataverse, and you handle the rest. Or someone has set up, as you showed, someone has selected the right OData services. Someone set up, obviously initially wants the connectivity to my SAP system, and that's it. Now I, as the maker, can just consume this data, and I don't even need to care where it's coming from.
It's a really great, I think one of the great like things about it too is that, I mean, we've all been there with like everything that you do like enterprise wise, every process, it's not like one system is the only system involved in a major process, right? And so like Dataverse is such a great place for just like abstracting away all of the like nitpicky little system connection kinds of things and data points and whatever into here's my harmonized view of this is just a maker making a process work. Sometimes it's a little harder when you like consider all those things, but from the end user standpoint, it just becomes I'm just doing my thing. And all of the integration stuff that maybe sometimes we used to do in, you know, in like for Fiori apps inside SAP Gateway or whatever like that too, it becomes a natural place. Like Dataverse becomes a little bit more natural place to sort of stitch together the rug of a great app.
And I think that's a good point as far as, you know, just the separation of concerns. You know, that was something that we thought about a lot as far as, you know, what an SAP ABAP developer's role is in this, you know, curating data, exposing OData services. But then, you know, once you get it into Dataverse, to Paul's point, you know, now it's like an on-ramp into all kinds of different options where, you know, if we've done our job well on the SAP side of the house and expose, you know, those entities, the sales orders, the, you know, what have you, then, you know, the possibilities from that point, you know, become, it's not so much of that one-off, or we need to write an interface for this virtual agent, we need to write an interface for this, you know, Cloudflow. Like it's just all there.
James and I both have a lot of ABAP in our lives. It has touched our hearts in a number of ways, and I think like part of this is like we want to let ABAPers be ABAPers too, right? Like once you've made your OData service, you're as an ABAP person, your job is now done, right? And go on and do other things and work your other magic, right?
And I mean, just this week I was at a customer where we had some discussions with both the SAP team and the Microsoft team, and they were literally sitting, well not opposite, but in their groups. There was this SAP team and the Microsoft, which makes total sense. I mean, but it was hard to get them together basically. And in this scenario, as you described, the SAP team, they could just work on what they know best, and that's exposing these services, making them available. Then you need obviously one guy or one person to do the configuration once, but then after this initial thing is done, then the Microsoft team could just continue to work in their own world basically, and then consuming data on the SAP side. So basically, it's fusing the SAP and the Microsoft teams.
Hey, what a great name!
I wonder why you choose the fuse, right?
No, that's really, really cool. And Paul, you brought up a very good point about the AI thing, because if I look at all the investments that are happening right now with the Power Platform, and you know that we've talked about this in several occasions. I think AI and low code is such a perfect fit to really enable the maker to do things. And if I look at the scribe to Flow, I actually don't know the exact name, where I can just say, if an email arrives, send it to SharePoint and fetch data from Dataverse, for example, then it creates the flow for me. And now with this, I can also consume data from the SAP system, because for it shouldn't matter now. It's the data is in Dataverse, and that should be it. So
it's funny you mentioned that particular flow, because that's literally the flow we use to test that it works. Is write an email and send it to the thing, and like poof, now you have a service notification, and it totally works. But it's weird to show, because we need to send that feedback to your team that you have to say the technical name.
We'll do that. We need to definitely after the show we need to connect there, because I think that is for me a huge enabler. I mean, if the business person knows best what they need. I mean, they know the issue. They have counted this, and they can describe what they want. But now they can type what they want. Then Power Platform generates the flow. And if we have now this connectivity to the SAP system via Dataverse, then that's the solution basically.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it like, and I apologize because I could go on about AI forever. But the other thing with these copilots too is that like it's like a you can have the conversation about the thing, right? If its first try is wrong about something, you just say, "Oh, actually, I want that table to be blah and the field to be blah," and that it looks back at itself in essence and makes those changes. Like you don't have to get it in one shot like a program. You can talk to the machine and have the machine like walk the path with you toward that stuff. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Well, perfect. Any other thoughts on the integration, or can you talk about some customer examples or projects where this integration is already used?
Yeah, so we've been, field service seems to be a really hot area. Customer service probably in general, I suppose. Where it just the Fuse business case makes a lot of sense. In the you've got in one of our extreme cases, one of our customers, I think they enumerated over 500, call it field service adjacent systems that live in the universe. And so, obviously Dynamics is in the mix, SAP is in the mix, but being able to take that and, you kind of touched on it, just using Dataverse basically as a control plane, where a lot of data is coming together. I mean, we've got data coming in from Oracle, we've got data coming in from streaming, and that platform has really unlocked, I think, a lot of very interesting use cases. What started off as, let's get a handful of Power Apps built, quickly segued into Power Pages and customer and vendor, supplier, self-service portal experiences. Virtual agents is something that we're in the middle of right now. Getting into scenarios where especially with the generative AI capabilities that have recently come along, these full circle scenarios where imagine something like Dynamics Field Service, I'm totally blanking on the name, the where you can call out to teams like phone a friend essentially.
Oh yeah, whatever the feature is, I forget what that is. Yeah.
Remote assist. Sorry, just totally blanked on that.
Okay, yes.
But that flow is very interesting because let's say you have a technician in the field, they're working on something, they need help, they call up a colleague, and right in Teams they work through the issue, and there's the telestration, all of that. That transcript gets fed into the record in field service, so now it's data that can be mined and used to basically continue to build a knowledge base. Now you take that knowledge base and point it at Power Virtual Agents, and now I have this more intelligent agent. So it starts to become full circle, and you mix in Fuse to maybe ask when was the last time this particular piece of equipment was serviced. Things like that. I think the combinatory aspect of this has been very, very interesting for us to see. Customers just coming up with creative ideas left and right on. Once I have the data, well, now I can do all kinds of things that just were not on the radar before.
I forgot the other, because there were two because we mentioned we were talking about, hey, you're fusing together all these things. What an interesting name for the product is Fuse. But I think there's another inspiration for why we named it that too. So not just like data fusion, but and I think Microsoft has been a really good leader in this place of sort of promoting this idea of fusion teams, right? Of designers, developers, business analysts, et cetera, like really coming together, and from a Power Platform side of things, getting lots of stuff done very quickly and easily, cross collaborating. And like the more we take the SAP hardness out of the mix of that, the more that those fusion teams have a really fast, like they can iterate on their UIs, and they can iterate on their flows, and they can iterate on whatever they need to do. And that sense of the Fusion as like the people Fusion is really powers up what that stuff does too.
I mean, generally these kind of integration is always something which can drive extremely the TCO up if it's missing or if it's hard. So if you can cross it from technical perspective, easily abstract it from usability perspective of the data, plus plugging the AI stuff, I mean, the use cases, they just explode here.
To the moon.
Yeah.
And the Azure side of it has been interesting as well. We've had, just your mobile apps and things like that, but very recently wrapped up a project where we developed a Power App where we're using the form recognition service within Azure. So, basically the use case was the technician would go snap a picture of a nameplate in front of a transformer piece of equipment, grab all the data, feed it into the form, and that form is connected to SAP. And so it's a very quick and easy way for them to do inspections and other things. And so, again, kind of that convergence of different services.
Cool. Yeah, I would never imagine, but yeah, it does make sense. Absolutely makes sense because you have all the components, so to say. You just cook the meal as per requirement. Yeah.
That's a good metaphor. We should do some like chef naming stuff for other
chef,
things. Yeah.
Cool, guys.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Yeah. So thank you so much for introducing this. Again, I was really glad to see this integration really into Dataverse, and as you said, James, as a starting point, as an enabler for all these different tools that are by default connected to Dataverse, and now all of a sudden there's also SAP part of the Dataverse story.
Yeah, it's the possibilities there are pretty staggering. We can kind of get every time we go into the Azure product catalog, it's there's so much stuff.
Cool. Well, great. Thank you so much for coming on our show today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, for sure.
It was really great to see both of you here, but also to really see this integration live in the demo. And also thanks, Paul, for getting a behind the scene glimpse of what you've developed there.
Sure.
Perfect.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.